Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2023 Council of the Americas Symposium. Please welcome to the stage Susan Segal, President and CEO of the Americas Society Council of the Americas.
Good morning.
Morning.
Fantastic. And welcome to the 2023 Council of the Americas Symposium, where we are very excited to bring together influential leaders from across the Americas to discuss the future of business in Latin America. After months of preparation, collaboration, and teamwork, we're finally here and so grateful to our attendees, Council of the Americas members, partners, and speakers for joining us once again in Latin America's business capital, Miami. I want to also welcome the local diplomatic community, our special guests, and everyone that is joining us virtually this morning. First of all, I would like to thank Maria Lourdes Terán, Yandira Marin, the main architect of the forum, along with the entire office, Mercedes Fernandez, Cindy, Luciana, Andres, along with everyone else throughout the organization who has supported the event. Maria Lourdes should be opening the day, but she's saving her voice for this evening. I want to give an applause to everyone on the team that worked on this. Every year, the Council of the Americas Symposium has something special that distinguishes it, touching on new trends and strategic perspectives that undoubtedly mold the following year in our region. Latin America has always been a land of immense potential and diversity, with a tapestry of nations and cultures that enrich our collective identity. However, the dynamics of global business world are evolving faster than ever before. In an era of rapid change, it's vital for us to understand and adapt and capitalize on the global trends that influence the prosperity of our communities and the future of our businesses, while recognizing the opportunities for intersection within our industries. Since we last met, new studies have shown that Latin American economy is expected to grow by 2% this year, setting the stage for a cautiously optimistic 2024. And I would draw your attention to the new Americas Quarterly that came out this week, that actually talks about the optimistic case for Latin America. Overall, economic policies continue to look towards increasing social inclusion and reducing poverty. But the region's new challenge is providing opportunities for a young population. People are hungry for higher skilled jobs, opening up even more possibilities for economic mobility and talented workers. Politically, we've also seen an interesting election cycle. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva returned to office in January. Daniel Noboa, as the country's youngest president, was elected in Ecuador this past weekend. Argentinians are heading to the polls to elect a new president this weekend, at least the first round. And while Mexico is already preparing for 2024, and I want to point out that there are 2 women candidates, which is just extraordinary and very, very exciting. With new leadership emerging across the region, presidents are looking towards creating opportunities for investment, development, and value-added jobs in not only traditional sectors, but in sustainability, technology, and innovation. That's why we are so proud to welcome 400 top executives from across those industries, as well as finance and consumer goods, sustainability sectors, to explore the nuanced global factors that are shaping our region. The conversations we engage in and the insights we share will help us, we hope, stay ahead of the curve and, of course, make us more competitive. Now it's a moment to harness the trends that foster innovation, drive sustainable growth, and ultimately contribute to the well-being of our region. This morning, we once again hosted our private roundtables for chief executives, chief sustainability officers, and chief people officers. These gatherings are part of a larger symposium and are testament to the power of collaboration and the impact that can be achieved when influential leaders come together to exchange ideas, share experiences, and collectively work towards a common goal. A stronger Latin America is, of course, a stronger hemisphere. I encourage you all to seize the opportunities that will come across your plate today and look for those moments of meaningful dialogue with your peers. Be open to fresh perspectives and solutions that only in-person meetings can achieve. Before we close, I'd like to recognize this year's Bravo honorees as we also celebrate the 28th Bravo Business Awards. This evening, each person represents leadership, dedication, and outstanding expertise in their field. We're thrilled to honor leaders from the United States Southern Command, and of course a woman, Banco Central do Brasil, Empresa CMPC, and Grupo Mariposa. I would also like to thank our 2023 Bravo Series sponsors, Bank of America, Jeffrey Group, the AES Corporation, Grupo Mariposa, Pfizer, Chubb, Diageo, Fitch Ratings, MasterCard, Moody's, Investor Service, Salesforce, SAP, FedEx, Grupo Promerica, BlackRock, and our partner, the Inter-American Development Bank, as well as our media supporters, America's Quarterly, Bloomberg Línea, CNN en Español, and Estrategia y Negocios, for helping us tell the stories of Latin America's most important business leaders. Thank you all for being a part of this conversation together. We're shaping the future, and together we're making an impact across Latin America. Now, let's kick it off with our first Bravo Dialogue, Global Trends Shaping Latin American Business Landscape. In welcoming our distinguished opening panel, I would like to introduce Marco Gunn, Senior Vice President and Regional President of the Chubb Group, Todd Martinez, co-head of America's Sovereign Ratings and Senior Director of Fitch Ratings, Rosana Padilla, President for Latin America for Kenvue, welcome, Helmut Retzinger, CEO, Emerging EMEA, which is Emerging Markets, and LATAM for Palo Alto Networks, and our moderator, my friend Gabriela Frias. CNN en Español. Muchas gracias a todos y le paso la palabra.
Gracias, Susan. Thank you very much, Susan. Good morning. Buenos dias. How are you? It's Friday, but yeah. So we're the first panel, and it's going to be very exciting. Before I give you the floor, let me just set the scene, because we're going to be talking about global trends that are shaping Latin America and the business landscape. In his televised address to the nation last night, President Biden characterized the current moment as an inflection point in history when referring to the Israel war against Hamas and Russia's invasion in Ukraine. Some months ago, President Biden warned that the US itself is at an inflection point when describing the political polarization, and he has used that same phrase in other instances, inflection point. Although some have already criticized President Biden because he has reached an inflection point of overusing that phrase. We can certainly agree that the events of the past 3 years represent potential fundamental changes, and events are happening in some countries in our region that represent that exactly. Even experts at McKinsey talk about a new era taking shape, a multipolar world with new technologies that offer both promise and concern, where countries battle to reduce emissions and access the resources needed for it while facing unprecedented debt and slowing growth. And as Susan said, Latin America can be part of the solution to some of the world's main challenges, but how can business leaders, how can you help, and how can the corporate sector contribute meaningfully in developing our region's potential? Can we realize finally that potential? We're going to talk about that. So I want to thank you all for being here. And to set the scene, the macroeconomic scene for what we're going through right now with these global trends, let me just ask you, Todd Martinez, if you can start with a brief description of this scene setter.
Great. Thanks, Gabby, and it's a real pleasure to be here. So I think if you would have told me at this event 2 years ago that in 2023 the federal funds rate would be around 5% and that China, the new normal for China might be growth below 5%, I would tell you this is an absolutely terrible backdrop for Latin America. I would have expected a lot of downgrades in sovereign credit ratings. I would expect recession. And pretty remarkably, it's been a pretty good year. So I kind of share the sentiment in the new article in the Americas Quarterly that Susan mentioned, which is the relatively bullish case for Latin America. And I think that's been reflected in, we've had 6 sovereign upgrades, a lot of them in Central America. There's an interesting story going on there, but also Brazil. We've had a few other countries on positive outlook. We've only had a few downgrades, and those mostly relate to countries going through pretty severe economic and political crises. But the balance is positive, and I think we've significantly revised up growth for the region's 2 biggest economies. That's Brazil and Mexico. The Andean countries are slowing quite a bit this year, but that's after a few years of very strong growth, so we see it as sort of a healthy slowdown. So I think the word of the day, especially in this very volatile global context, is resilience. What's behind this resilience? I think policies in the region have been pretty good, most of all in the region's central banks. They've been some of the world's most proactive in dealing with this inflation shock, more so than the developed economies. Yes, there's been a lot of shifting between governments from right to left and back and forth, but we haven't seen that lead to big changes in economic models in both countries. We're pretty impressed with the resilience of the region. That said, I don't know if resilience means we're now much more bullish on the outlook for Latin America. There is a lot to get excited about for Latin America, like nearshoring and being part of the global energy transition. But I don't see a lot of reforms in the region, even in more stable countries, reforms that could help them harness this potential and really take advantage of it. Politics are pretty messy in the region, and even though that's the case globally, Latin America is not alone in that regard, certainly. I still think that makes it hard to pass some of these reforms that are needed to really take advantage of all these upsides. So I'm sure that's something we'll talk about in more depth, is the nearshoring trend and the green energy transition. But I guess the main thing I would caution, or the main risk we see, is that these upsides are exaggerated and they engender a bit of complacency in Latin America, because that is Latin America's track record. When commodity prices are high, or there's some other kind of really positive narrative on the horizon, it might take away the urgency from all of the other much needed reforms that the region needs.
And besides resiliency, let me just, journalists are judged to be negative, but let me just suggest to look at the glass half full, but at the same time acknowledge that Latin America is going to have one of the slowest, if not the slowest, growth this year, which has been the case. So we don't want, for me, the word is ambition, the vision to growth. And I think we're overdiagnosed in terms of what we need to do. How do you see the impetus of change, of taking stock of this moment? For example, countries like Mexico with the nearshoring, are we to see that, wow, Mexico is doing great? No, because there's the limit of the energy reform, for example. So what do you see in terms of that, impetus of reform in the next couple of years when the political factor and elections are coming in many of these big economies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we see a lot of discussion about nearshoring, but not a lot of impetus in terms of reforms to really take advantage of it. And I'd say, first of all, nearshoring is really the hot topic, but we've looked a lot at the data, and it's not clear that it's really telling much of a nearshoring story anyway. Yes, FDI is up in the region, but it's not the subcomponent of FDI that's really kind of greenfield investment, new companies arriving to the region and setting up operations. Investment to GDP is still that ratio that kind of determines the growth outlook is still the lowest in Latin America of any emerging market region. And I think Mexico is a pretty interesting case because there's this big nearshoring opportunity. It's not so visible in the data to us yet, but you hear a lot of anecdotal evidence of things being very busy in the north. But when we've talked to a lot of people about the nearshoring potential, there's a lot of excitement around it, but some people are holding back because there is this bottleneck different bottlenecks, namely in terms of access to electricity and access to clean electricity, because companies themselves are subject to some pretty to higher ESG standards. So even though Mexico's next door, it's fairly stable, it has a lot of advantages. We don't see a lot of progress, especially in Mexico, on this particular bottleneck and alleviating it to really unleash the potential of nearshoring. Instead, in a lot of places in Latin America, the focus instead seems to be on tax breaks. Trying to encourage some of this investment by giving tax breaks. And that might help at the margin, but Latin America is not a region where anyone has a significant degree of fiscal space to encourage nearshoring by giving a lot of tax breaks, in our opinion.
Thank you, Todd. To Marcos, we could talk about insurance in so many respects, from property to what's going on with new products, from fintechs in the region. But we also have to talk about extreme weather and how climate change is challenging us and in the region. Wildfires, hurricanes, floodings. How are those trends, or which ones would you point when my key question was, since yesterday, are more places becoming uninsurable, for example?
And you're asking me this in Florida. Thank God I don't run US.
I know.
But I think we're all aware of climate change. I think it's turning a blind eye to it is not smart, practically ridiculous. And so for us as insurers, which at the end of the day, we are in the business of risk. We are in the business of taking on risk of our clients. And as Chubb, and specifically in Latin America, we operate in 9 countries, and we take care of very large multi-Latinas, all the way to SMBs, to then our consumer lines. So when we look at climate, it's about understanding that risk, working with our clients to prevent and minimize the impact of climate, to the point that our latest practice within the company is called Climate Plus, and it's how can we serve new investments and current investments in green energy to be able to be successful and be able to grow. But having said that, we're all aware of La Nina, El Nino. Because I've had I've been very fortunate to started my career in Argentina, and we know which are the risks there. Not so much natural; it's probably more man-made. Unfortunately, we'll see what happens Sunday. But then I had the chance to live in Chile, and 2 years into Chile, I had an earthquake, and there I was being responsible to take care of. I think at the time we had over 1,000 losses with the clients that had losses because of the earthquake. And how, as an insurer, we have a real social interest and really being able to be with our customers in a very difficult time. And then you think about and then the next move was within the region was to Mexico, and there we got hurricanes going in from the Pacific, hurricanes coming in through the Caribbean, to the point that when I was a year into that, we had, if you remember, there was 2 Class 5 hurricanes coming from both sides at the same time, and I was just going like, can this be possible? And in the center of the country, you have quake, and then you have floods in the north. So, yes, risk is climate and obviously Nat Cat is a factor, and something also to consider is what supply chain constraints and what inflation has done, and in that sense is how do we work with our customers to make sure that they're properly insured, that they know what they're covering, what are we taking on as a risk, in terms of values, in terms of exposures, and obviously, and I think the purpose, or my personal purpose working for a company like Chubb is giving back. No, we are there with our customers in the most difficult times.
How is it challenging the industry in terms of developing products, especially if we think about underserved areas in Latin America?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think we're and everyone that thinks about insurance, and I really don't think it's true to say, oh, insurance is boring. And I got to say, with everything I said about climate change, and then you have all the rest of the risks. No, it's not only property, it's casualty, it's marine, it's financial lines, and so on. But technology is allowing us to do something which is absolutely amazing. Because it's allowing us to get to customers that we have never been able to get to. So, an example, a large fintech in Brazil, I'll say it, Nubank, big partner of ours. We started about 18 months ago to really develop a new set of products. And when you think about customers, and so there's a massive part of the population in Latin America that has never had access to insurance. But that doesn't mean that they don't want it or they don't need it. And as we can get to those customers with a partner like them, and through technology, in the old days you would think, oh, I want a policy, and an agent would say, okay, if I've got product A, product B, product C, which one fits your needs? Right now, we can put a product in front of a customer that behind it, it's 1,200 policies. It's because that customer on the app can say, okay, I don't know, 500 reales. I want 1,000 reales of life, and I want to add hospital cash, and I want to insure my parents against for gasto de sepelio. So we are being able to get to really not only to go against our competitors. It's about really making the insurance industry, the pie, bigger, and being able to serve a much wider range of customers that we didn't get to. And the other thing is, and I was talking last night to my colleagues in the table. It's for the first time I feel that we're not selling insurance. No, we have our customers buying insurance. And you think about it now, yeah, we sell. No, there's finally, through technology and through understanding our customers and being able to, through data, really understanding their needs, is to put forward a value proposition and the customers buying it with us without anyone just going or calling on the phone or getting a knock on the door. So there's something really transformative going on in the industry right now.
Thank you, Marcos. Let's talk more about consumers. And for that, let's talk to Rosana Padilla from Kenvue. As you know, Kenvue is formerly the consumer healthcare division of Johnson & Johnson. You have been pretty busy during and after COVID, and with more people wanting to better take care of themselves, preferring probably not to go to the doctor, using technology. What are those trends that are shaping your operation? And I know then probably we should discuss how your company has adjusted in terms of manufacturing and supply chains to meet the demand. But what are those trends that you're looking into?
Yeah, effectively, COVID was, I won't say an inflection point, but a pivoting moment for people being more self-conscious on self-care. But there's also another trend that has been growing, and it's women in leadership positions. So both trends, we have an agenda and looking at these trends of women in leadership positions and self-care. Let's say, where they converge? Well, I see a trend on companies with the COVID and the lockdown and everyone going home, empowering women to occupy more leadership positions. We have seen this evolution in 10 years. Women in leadership positions occupying 21% of women in those positions in the private sector, but also growing in the public sector. And then after COVID, it became 31%. Still a lot to do. And flex policies in the companies are super important for women to continue increasing their representation in the private sector. And also flex policies allow self-care. Self-care is super important, and going to investment and Latin America growth. Self-care is prevention. Self-care is taking our health and wellness in our own hands, and we are empowering consumers to do so. Self-care brings benefits to governments in terms of savings, and I will give you two numbers. Increasing and shaping public policy on self-care, which we don't have in Latin America, can bring $7.2 billion of savings to healthcare systems. If we bring those savings, we can also unleash growth and allow those costs of healthcare, of chronic diseases, to go elsewhere to promote GDP growth, right? And the other thing that called my attention is flu. You know, if you go to a public sector for diarrhea, headache, fever, this costs in Latin America $2.7 billion. So imagine if we can empower consumers that are more self-conscious after COVID, more informed on taking care of themselves, and empowering them to have the right information to avoid those $2.7 billion of cost of going to simple, diseases and take care of themselves. So we have seen the self-care market, despite the GDP is not very active, we do see private consumption and self-care markets growing, and these will continue to grow. But we need to shape public policy to include self-care as part of the government's agendas as well, and to prevent additional costs, but also to unleash investment for growth and putting those dollars, or those pesos, those reales, at the service of growth in the economies.
Can you point at any country that could be an example of what you're talking about that is needed, that we need to do, probably in the region or not?
Yeah, our focus is more with the Global Self-Care Association and ILAR in Brazil, which is the main country. So we are hosting an event 2 weeks from now in Sao Paulo, where we are going to talk about self-care, everything around self-care and shaping the public policy in our largest country in Brazil. There's a lot still to do, but we're going to be there in the conversation trying to shape this environment.
And it's interesting because even the World Bank, Todd, has mentioned if governments in Latin America, or if Latin America can use more technology, that could mean savings for governments. So now we have another area where governments could save if they could, implement a certain type of policy at a time where public resources are scarce. Let me move to Helmut, because your company, cybersecurity, touches every single part of our life, from our phones to our electricity. And this year we've reported on schools being hacked, on ransomware. Last year we were talking about Costa Rica, which was a very dramatic case where the government had to declare emergency because of a situation like that. So my question to you first, what are those trends that right now you're seeing in the region, to begin with?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Buenos dias, bom dia. Pleasure to be with you. You hear it from my voice. I'm European. I'm taking care of Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. And resilience was mentioned before. And, in the region that I'm responsible for in the global team of Palo Alto Networks, the #1 in cybersecurity, the world is a bit upside down, as you can guess. Think about Ukraine, think about Middle East. I say this with my compassion for Latin America. It's a moment now for advancing Latin America at global scale. And you have lots of good ingredients to do that. Now, talking about cyber, let me give you first, what do we see in terms of the cyber threat landscape? Because hackers do not know borders. In the digital space, you do not have borders. And you can be exposed as a public entity, like the government that you mentioned. You can be exposed as a multinational enterprise because Latin America is attractive. You have fantastic industrial automation. When I think of Chile, Brazil, Mexico, you have a very splendid fintech sector. There is money in Brazil, for example. So what do we see in terms of the threat landscape? There are a few factors that drive the exposure, whether it's in Germany or whether it's in Latin America. The first one is geopolitics. There are states out there that have an interest to disrupt. Full stop. That's the main interest. Or to prepare disruption, to infiltrate. Second, think about critical infrastructure. I heard before in the morning session, Latin America could be there to feed and fuel the world. Mm-hmm. Fueling means critical infrastructure. You have seen what it means if a pipeline is out of order due to a ransomware attack in the US. Democracies are vulnerable. And by the way, there, as a European, I must say, the US did something very smart. President Biden has issued last year, even though there is an Atlantic Ocean between US and Ukraine, an executive order to ask every entity of the federal government of the United States to do what is called an attack surface analysis, which means you step into the shoes of the attacker. What does he see from outside looking at your organization? And I mention this because it's public that Palo Alto Networks did win this massive contract, but this shows you the degree of alertedness. So, geopolitics, critical infrastructure. The third thing is your digital transformation. As you said, we become more and more digital, whether we use it on the mobile phone or whether we use it within the organization. There's a few things I need to show you how the exposure goes up. The first thing is the new way of working. 15 years ago, majority of the exposure of an enterprise was you had a headquarter, you have production sites, you have sales office. Nowadays, with post-COVID world, 80% of the workers will work some form of hybrid. Mm-hmm. Every tablet that is out there, sitting on a train, connecting to your enterprise digital assets is an exposure. Okay? So the attack surface is growing. Second topic here, the softwareization. We need it because we want to drive productivity. The problem is, whether it's in the US, in Brazil, or whether it's in United Kingdom, 80% of software that is coded is using open source components free from the internet. Everybody does it. The problem is, if one of those little components called library, for example, contains malware, you have a super snowball effect. Third topic, the Internet of Things, the meeting between the IT world and the operational technology, the industrial control systems world is going more and more connected. Think about hospitals. Big issue in healthcare, by the way. France, a prime example in this case. The fourth topic is the move to cloud. Mm-hmm. I talked about the cloud-oriented, cloud-native fintech sectors. Yet more than 40% of what the enterprises are putting onto the cloud is not protected. So these are factors that make that the attack surface is growing.
What percentage? 40%?
40%, yeah.
Wow.
But this means that the attack surface is growing. Now, there's another thing that you need to bear in mind. Artificial intelligence is coming. Now, Palo Alto Networks has been doing AI/supervised machine learning. We started with that back 8.5 years ago. Okay, so we did not invent this because, ChatGPT out there, let's talk about AI. But this will lead to a scaling of the attacks, much easier coding of an attack, and very smart social engineering, where somebody pretends to be Gabriela, but she is not Gabriela in real life. If I give you this example. Now, another factor that you need to know, and then I come to how you can protect your digital assets, is the time between infiltration into an organization or an enterprise to exfiltration of data and then to oppress you 3 years ago, 2021, it was about 43 days. Okay, so somebody was looking around, where are the right data, etc. It has gone down to last year being 5 days only. And we predict it's going to be hours. Why is this important for you as multi-Latinas or as Latin American businesses? Think about the ruling that is taking place. Now, in December this year, there's the new Stock Exchange Commission ruling where every critical incident by a stock-listed company in the US needs to be reported within 4 days. So you need to know what's going on. Now, if I take a view to our industry, the strange thing is that we have a very fragmented industry in cybersecurity because for every new threat, there's a new enterprise, new startup creator and say, I have the perfect solution. There's 3,500 vendors out there. We are the number one, luckily. And the issue is that has led to a lot of enterprises, mid-sized to large, they use between 20 to 35 different tools to protect. The problem is these tool sets don't speak to each other, so you have holes in between. Now, the way to protect your digital assets is you need to have real-time cybersecurity because it gets shorter and shorter to exfiltration. And the other thing is you need to leverage AI to, we call it autonomous cybersecurity. We don't have the people, the experts, neither in Latin America, nor in the US, nor in Europe, to do all this manually. You need to leverage AI to protect yourself. And this is across networks. So you need to have good, what we call cyber telemetry data. And we always compare what's going on between an identity, let's talk Gabriela, her device, the application she's using, and the behavior that is out there. This is how we discovered the SolarWinds attack that you have seen, which was a super complex attack. And in this context, you need to have telemetry data from networks, firewalls, endpoints. The endpoint can be an industrial machine. It can be an automated teller machine of a bank. It can be your tablet, your cloud assets, in whichever cloud you have your stuff. And then you apply your AI algorithms, and then you can come to an outcome, what we achieve in our Security Operations Center with our solutions, which is 10 seconds mean time to detect, 10 seconds.
Wow.
And 1 minute mean time to remediate. And this, knowing that we are discovering, and it's not by humans, it's our algorithms and machines, that we are discovering every day 1.5 million, I repeat, 1.5 million new attacks that have not been there. The number is going up because there is more AI used on the bad side as well. So Latin America in this context is exposed because you're a super interesting region. And you have also something else which I explained to the Europeans, because in Europe there's a lot of climate activism, people are gluing themselves on the street. Here we have a unit which we call Unit 42. It's a small professional service unit for threat intelligence. You have, for example, Guacamaya. It's a hacktivist group that is targeting specifically primary materials or fossil fuel industry players, pipeline providers, and says, we don't necessarily want your dollars or your pesos. We want to do harm to you because you're not doing something good for the planet.
Now, let's start thinking about governments. Governments can help ensure government policy, because we're about to be over. It's incredible. One thing that I was wondering, Helmut, then Latin America, can we really talk about digital transformation if cybersecurity doesn't follow along? And I'm also wondering about the reaction from governments when you have an instance like this, the way they manage. At the end is your information, the citizens' information, that gets exposed. If you can tell us about some of those lessons that you've learned or that we should learn in Latin America on how to handle that as well, because I think it's important since they get hacked, but the information is ours.
Well, a generic approach I would advise you as an enterprise or as a government in general, by the way, that's true in Germany, it's true also in Latin America, stop thinking isolated security solutions, think holistically, combine best of breed, so one of these, with a platform approach, because the better you have telemetry data, the better you can defend yourself. That's number one. Number two, leverage trusted relationships. We work a lot, your question was to governments, we work a lot with even Interpol, Europol. We are not a law enforcement agency. But you might have read in the news there was a big ransomware network that was brought down by the FBI and the German police, by the way, called HIVE. We have done the groundwork because we were asked by an enterprise customer who said, I cannot access my data anymore. And we could see that the data was actually transported towards one of the Baltic states, but then pointing, we call it beaconing, out to Russia. And then we saw that where the data was aggregated, this was concerning already more than 30 enterprises. And then we did the preparation and we said, okay, this, but then we handed over to the law enforcement and they did the next step. So leverage trusted relationships also for governments. And also in that case, please rethink the way how cybersecurity is approached. You need to have a good governance in place as well and build up the expertise. Most of the problems are becoming of software vulnerabilities. That's why attack surface analysis is critical, to know where are our exposures. By the way, this can be implemented rather quickly. Second, educate your staff about awareness. We have this internally also ongoing on our side, because a lot of parties is human factor. And then awareness when it comes to email, business email compromise. One of the most frequent vectors that somebody sends you a nice email and your people click on it. Yeah? Happened recently in the diplomatic network in Ukraine. More than 32 embassies, unfortunately, clicked on something because it was a fantastic BMW offered at a spectacularly low price by a diplomat who was going out of Kiev. So easy to socially engineer.
Thank you, Helmut. 6 minutes to finish this conversation, but going back to you, Marcos. Modeling risk, collaboration with governments. In the U.S., there's a certain type of insurance for people that cannot afford, regular insurance. But for the region, what type of public policy is needed, considering the context right now, whether it's the climate change, et cetera? Please.
Yeah. Helmut, I just want to say one thing. Chubb is the biggest underwriter of cyber insurance in the world, and it's everything that you said just resonates, at least from a risk perspective, and so we'll talk later. To your question, Gabi, I think the most important thing, and I just think about it there's two sides of the coin, and when you said about accessibility, it's about, for us to be able to get to customers, we need and our model is not a direct-to-consumer model. We partner. We look for that B2B2C, and to be able to offer our products, it's about getting to the customer and then being able to collect from those customers and then be able to pay to those customers. So obviously financial inclusion is key, and that's why I think there's a massive opportunity in Latin America, and I think the region has been probably in the vanguard of fintechs and insurtechs, and the way that those fintechs are being able to get to parts of the population that never was bankerized. And that gives us the opportunity, as I said a little bit earlier on, is be able to develop products that really fit the needs of those customers. And we can go as low as, again, same example, we put behind 1,200 coverages behind just one seamless experience for that customer to be able to buy what they want to buy. And the average premium of that product is $2, all right? It's just 10 reales. So that couldn't be done. So when I think about regulation, it's just allowing us to be able to develop those kind of products, and allowing, I say, the other side of the coin is that the neobanks, the digital, the fintechs, to be able to continue growing within the region. And with that, we are going to be able to again, protect more people in those bad times. And when I think about the larger, and as you say, climate, and you think about cyber, it's working with the regulators around, what are the products, what does it cover, how do we measure the risk, and how obviously we have to have the right solvency margins and the balance sheet to be able to protect our customers in those moments. So I would focus it on those two.
Thank you. Rosana,
Yes.
what did you say?
As I mentioned, shaping the self-care environment will help us reduce even, costs for insurance, will empower our employees, also education on how to protect their data, because healthcare data, it's out there, right? So it's always a trade-off on bringing this cybersecurity also to the healthcare arena and the self-care shaping of policy, how to protect that data, which is private. It's sensitive, right? But it's out there in the cyberspace. So there's always positives and negatives. So we will continue to shape the self-care policy, but with responsibility on how to empower consumers to keep their healthcare data private, right? While also giving them the power to maintain their health for a longer time and their well-being. So as I mentioned, 2 weeks from now, we're going to be in Sao Paulo shaping this agenda.
Thank you. Todd, how would you close? I know that coming months, uncertainty is going to remain. But if you were to give one last message of, call to action, caution, what to do to our audience, what would you say?
Yeah, I think listening to my panelists, it's pretty clear that we're in a world of ever-increasing risk. There's climate-related risks, there's health-related risks, there's cyber-related risks, and these have really all come to the fore more than ever in the past few years. So I think more than ever, there's going to be a lot of impetus on governments to be helping societies mitigate this risk. To some degree, that's going to require some additional spending, but I guess my caution specifically for Latin America is try to find a way to make sure that that spending is such that it's the most beneficial for these sort of risks. I see this sort of knee-jerk reaction in Latin America that when they do manage to find some fiscal space to spend more, it's just higher pensions, but not necessarily infrastructure investments or the other sorts of things that might even have a more beneficial effect on these sort of risks. And then, of course, as Marcos said, working with the private sector in a way that doesn't require government spending, changing regulations so that the private sector can thrive and industries like insurance can help people manage their own risks rather than just expect the government to be stepping in when those risks materialize.
Thank you. We're a minute away from finishing. Just want to say thank you. This is the first panel. Good luck and success in your day here, and thank you for your insights. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabby.